Been running the new crankcase ventilation system now for about 420 miles. I've got the Hayden Crankvent tied into the head cover, which exhausts to my catch can, which is then tied into the intake boot. It's been running pretty good, but one thing I have noticed is that my oil pressure seems to be a little bit lower than what it was before I was running the crank vent. That kind of makes sense since the suction head on the pump will now be a little less, because I'm running about anywhere from maybe 14 to 16 inches of water vacuum in the crankcase instead of a very, very small pressure, maybe 1.5 inches of water. So I wanted to do some tests to see if I can prove that the oil pressure drops off a little bit when the crankcase is subjected to a vacuum. I tied in an additional vent to the exhaust valve cover, and I ran that vent hose up adjacent to my oil pressure gauge, so I can cover and uncover that vent hose with my finger while the engine is running. Just like the test I did before, the crankcase is instrumented with a water manometer. I have that tied into the engine fill plug, water manometer over here. And I found that I really can't completely get rid of the vacuum. So, as you can see, I backed off the alternator plug and uncapped it just to allow me to drop the vacuum a little more. It's an unfortunate situation. I'm not going to be able to completely vent off the crankcase so that there's no vacuum at all in there, but I should be able to tell if the vacuum affects the oil pressure. Let's start it up and see how it runs.